When a wealthy black entrepreneur returned from an overseas business trip, he never expected police lights flashing outside his mansion. A meddling HOA Karen had reported him as a trespasser, yet she had secretly moved into his home. What unfolds next is a shocking tale of lies, privilege, and justice served. Malcolm Davenport had always been a man of order, discipline, and vision. At 38 years old, he was the founder of a thriving tech company that had gone from a tiny startup in a cramped Chicago apartment to a multi-million-dollar enterprise with offices in New York, Atlanta, and even Dubai. His latest 2-week trip overseas had been an exhausting marathon of investor meetings and speaking engagements, but when he stepped off the plane at O'Hare International Airport, all he could think about was home. Not just any home, a sprawling mansion tucked into one of Chicago's most exclusive gated communities, complete with manicured lawns, a private lake, and security patrols that circled the neighborhood every hour. To Malcolm, that mansion represented more than just wealth. It represented resilience. It was proof to himself and to the world that he had climbed out of the shadows of poverty and discrimination to create a life that many thought impossible. Born to a single mother in a neighborhood plagued by crime, he had grown up dodging every trap set for young black men like him. Drugs, gangs, police harassment. He had seen it all. But his mother's unwavering faith in education and his own unrelenting determination had carried him forward. That mansion was the culmination of those battles, a sanctuary where his success could breathe. As the car service pulled into the gated community, Malcolm leaned back in the leather seat, smiling faintly at the familiar sight. The pristine hedges, the stone fountains, the carefully paved roads, everything looked exactly as it always had. The security guard at the gate recognized him instantly, waving him through with a respectful nod. But Malcolm had no idea that while he had been away, someone else had made themselves very comfortable in his absence. It wasn't until his car pulled into the driveway of his mansion that the first prickling of unease crept into his chest. The driveway was not empty. A white Lexus SUV sat parked right in front of the garage doors as though it belonged there. He frowned. He hadn't left any cars behind when he traveled. His own vehicles, his black Range Rover, his Tesla, and his prized vintage Corvette were locked inside the garage. But this Lexus? He had never seen it before in his life. The driver stopped and glanced back at Malcolm. "That yours, sir?" "No," Malcolm said, his voice clipped. He stepped out of the car and stood in the driveway, staring at the vehicle. The license plate frame read, "Proud member of Willow Creek HOA." His frown deepened. Willow Creek was the community's homeowners association, infamous for its strict rules, endless fines, and self-appointed vigilantes who fancied themselves protectors of property values. He walked slowly toward the front door, dragging his suitcase behind him. That was when he noticed something even more disturbing. The lights were on inside. He could see a warm glow spilling from the windows of the living room. He had turned all the lights off before he left. Malcolm's pulse quickened. He set down his suitcase and pulled out his phone, his finger hovering over the keypad. Should he call the police? Or security? He decided instead to use the smart home system he had installed. His mansion was wired with cameras, locks, and motion detectors. But when he opened the app, he was met with a message that made his stomach drop. System offline. Someone had tampered with his security system. Hell no, Malcolm muttered under his breath. He wasn't reckless, but he wasn't about to let someone squat in his house either. He walked up to the front door, his jaw tight. To his shock, the door wasn't even locked. Inside, the sound of a television floated through the air. He pushed the door open slowly, and there she was. A woman, comfortably sprawled across his Italian leather sofa, eating a bowl of popcorn as though she owned the place. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smug expression. On the coffee table sat a glass of red wine, his red wine, from his personal collection. She didn't even flinch when she saw him standing in the doorway. "Excuse me?" Malcolm's voice boomed, his anger finally spilling over. The woman glanced at him and had the audacity to smirk. "Can I help you?" she asked, as though he were the intruder. "Help me," Malcolm repeated, incredulous. "This is my house. Who the hell are you and why are you in it?" The woman placed her popcorn down delicately, stood up, and crossed her arms. First of all, lower your tone. I don't appreciate being yelled at in my own community. Second, I live here now. The HOA approved it. Malcolm's eyebrows shot up. Approved what? You moving into my house? Lady, I don't know what you're smoking, but this is my property. My name is on the deed, my money paid for it, and you need to get out before I call the police. That was when she smiled, a chilling little grin that carried both arrogance and malice. Go ahead. Call the police. I already did. They should be here any minute. Malcolm blinked, stunned. You called the cops? On me? In my own house? Yes, she said smugly, because you don't look like you belong here. You're not fooling anyone. The real owner of this house is on vacation. The words hit him like a slap. For a brief moment, Malcolm almost laughed at the sheer absurdity. But the sound of approaching sirens in the distance turned his stomach to stone. She wasn't bluffing. The police were actually on their way, summoned to arrest him in his own mansion. Malcolm clenched his fists, his mind racing. He could already imagine the headlines. Wealthy black man mistaken for intruder in his own home. He had worked his entire life to build his reputation, his company, his legacy, and now, one entitled woman with an HOA badge and a smug grin threatened to unravel it all. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights began to flash across the driveway, reflecting off the mansion's windows. The woman, Karen, as he now understood her to be, smiled wider, like she had won some twisted battle. She actually believed she had the power to strip him of his home, his dignity, with one phone call. But Malcolm Davenport wasn't about to let her win. The red and blue glow of police cruisers splashed across the mansion's stone facade, casting long shadows that danced across the lawn. Malcolm stood frozen near the front door, watching as two squad cars screeched to a halt in his driveway. Karen, arms folded smugly across her chest, moved to the window as if she had been waiting for her allies to arrive. Perfect timing, she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. Now we can sort this whole thing out. Malcolm's jaw tightened. His life had taught him to remain calm when confronted by police, but the situation was surreal, infuriating. He hadn't broken into anyone's home, he hadn't trespassed. This was his house. And yet, thanks to one woman's arrogance and prejudice, he was about to have his character put on trial in his own living room. The front door swung open before he could stop it. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, hands already resting on their holsters. One was younger, his face taut with suspicion. The other was older, stockier, with tired eyes that suggested years of routine calls had worn down his patience. Karen pointed dramatically at Malcolm. That's him! That's the intruder! He barged in here and started threatening me. Malcolm's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Excuse me, you're seriously telling them I threatened you? This is my home. I just got back from a 2-week business trip overseas. My name is Malcolm Davenport. Check the deed, check the tax records, check the name on the Wi-Fi. The younger officer immediately shifted his stance, suspicion deepening. Sir, we're going to need you to keep your hands where we can see them. Step away from the woman. Malcolm took a slow breath, forcing his hands up to shoulder height. He had been in this position before, too many times in fact. Hands raised, tone measured, body language designed not to appear threatening. A black man's survival kit in America. This is insane, he said evenly. You've been lied to. She is the trespasser. She's been living here without permission while I was out of the country. Karen gasped theatrically. That is not true. I was given permission by the HOA. They told me the owner was gone and that the property needed to be monitored. I volunteered to house sit. I'm protecting this neighborhood. Malcolm barked a humorless laugh. Protecting it by drinking my wine and sitting on my couch? The officers glanced at each other. The older one cleared his throat. Ma'am, we'll need to verify your claim. Do you have paperwork from the HOA? Karen lifted her chin. Of course I do. I'll grab it. She hurried to the kitchen counter where a neat folder sat as if prepared for this very moment. She pulled out a printed document bearing the Willow Creek HOA letterhead, complete with signatures. Here. Proof that I'm here legitimately. The younger officer skimmed it quickly and handed it to his partner. Looks official. Malcolm's patience was thinning fast. You can forge anything on a printer these days. That paper doesn't prove a damn thing. My name is on the deed. You can pull it up right now in the county's database. Or better yet, I'll show you my passport. It has my name and this address." But Karen was already shaking her head. "Don't listen to him. He's just making up stories. I've seen him wandering around here before looking suspicious. The neighbors know me. They trust me. Ask anyone. He doesn't belong in this community." The sting of her words wasn't new to Malcolm. He had been told in subtle and blatant ways his entire life that he didn't belong. Not in prep schools, not in Ivy League classrooms, not in boardrooms. And now, even in the house he owned outright, his legitimacy was being questioned again. The older officer studied Malcolm carefully. "Sir, do you have identification on you?" "Yes," Malcolm said tightly. He reached slowly into his back pocket and retrieved his wallet, holding it out. "Driver's license. Passport's in my suitcase by the door if you need it. Both have this address." The older officer examined the license, then pulled out a small device to scan it. After a beat, he frowned. "It does show this address." The younger officer hesitated. "But the HOA letter?" "The HOA doesn't own my property," Malcolm cut in sharply. His voice rose despite himself, frustration bubbling over. "I own this home. I worked for it, paid for it. Every brick, every tile, every damn blade of grass on this lawn belongs to me. And this woman broke in and decided she had the right to live here. Now you're telling me I don't belong?" For the first time, Karen's smug expression wavered. She opened her mouth to retort, but the older officer raised his hand. "Ma'am, can you explain why the security system here is offline? The owner says he set it before leaving," Karen stammered. I had to disable it, for convenience. I didn't want it alarming every time I came home." "That's not how these systems work," Malcolm said, glaring at her. "You disabled it because you knew you weren't supposed to be here." The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught between two narratives. His hand still hovered near his holster, but doubt crept into his eyes. "We'll need to speak to the HOA directly," he muttered. Karen's mask of confidence snapped back into place. "Go ahead. They'll vouch for me. Everyone knows me here. I've been a proud member of Willow Creek for 10 years. Malcolm's lips curled into a bitter smile. "And everyone knows me too. But you don't want to admit that, do you? Because in your mind, someone like me couldn't possibly own this mansion. You'd rather believe a piece of paper than my word, my ID, and the facts." The air grew heavy. Even the police seemed to feel the weight of the accusation. Racism wasn't a word officers liked to have tossed around during a call, but here it was, unavoidable and glaring. The older officer finally exhaled and lowered his hand from his holster. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to call the HOA president and verify this arrangement. Until then, nobody's making any moves. Understood?" Karen nodded, though her jaw tightened. Malcolm crossed his arms. "Fine by me." The older officer stepped outside to make the call while the younger stayed inside, keeping watch. Karen busied herself with her folder, flipping through papers as though her legitimacy was self-evident. Malcolm sat stiffly on the edge of a chair, his fists clenched, his patience stretched to the breaking point. Minutes ticked by like hours. Finally, the older officer returned, his expression unreadable. "We spoke to the HOA president. He confirms you're a resident of Willow Creek, ma'am. But he did not authorize you to live in this house. He said no such arrangement exists." Karen's face drained of color. "What? That can't be right. I spoke to someone. They said it was fine." "Who?" the officer pressed. She faltered. I don't remember their name, but I know what I heard." Malcolm rose to his feet, triumph surging through him. "So you admit it. You lied. You broke into my home, squatted here for 2 weeks, and then had the audacity to call the police on me when I came back." The younger officer finally looked at Karen with narrowed eyes. "Ma'am, do you have keys to this house?" Karen's lips trembled. "No, I've been using the back door." That was it. The dam had broken. The officers exchanged a long glance, and for the first time, Karen looked unsure of herself. The confidence she had wielded like a weapon began to crack. But Malcolm knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, because people like Karen never gave up their sense of entitlement easily. And if she had been bold enough to move into his mansion and manipulate the system, then she surely had more tricks up her sleeve. He also knew one thing. This time he wasn't going to let her walk away unchallenged. The silence in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Karen's once confident posture had crumbled. She stood by the window, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to shuffle her papers into order. Malcolm remained by the chair, arms folded across his chest, his sharp gaze fixed on her like a spotlight exposing a fraud. The older officer broke the silence first. "Ma'am, you don't have keys. You don't have authorization. You admit you disabled the security system, and the HOA president says he never granted you permission to be here. Do you have any explanation?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes darted from the officers to Malcolm and back again, as if searching for someone to save her. I was just trying to keep the house safe. You don't understand. This neighborhood has standards. We don't want empty homes sitting around attracting the wrong kind of people." Malcolm's laugh was sharp and bitter. "The wrong kind of people? You mean me?" Karen stiffened. "Don't twist my words." "You don't need to twist them," Malcolm said, stepping closer. His voice was steady but laced with steel. "They speak for themselves. You saw a successful black man's home sitting vacant, and instead of respecting it, you decided you had more right to it than he did. You walked in here, drank my wine, sat on my couch, and called the police when I dared to reclaim it." The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the truth but unwilling to say it out loud. The older officer pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly tired of the charade. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for further questioning. This could be considered trespassing, maybe even breaking and entering." Karen's voice cracked with desperation. "You can't do this. I'm on the HOA board. I've lived here for years. I've given everything to this community. I was only trying to do what's best." "What's best for who?" Malcolm shot back. "Because it sure as hell wasn't best for me." The officers moved toward Karen, but she suddenly snapped out of her stupor, her voice rising into a shrill pitch. "You don't get it. He doesn't belong here. He doesn't fit this neighborhood. Look at him. Look at the cars he drives, the parties he throws. This community is about class, not flaunting wealth. He's lowering our property values." Malcolm's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to take a slow breath. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. Instead, he turned to the officers. "You hear that? That's what this is really about. Not the HOA, not some paperwork mix-up. It's about prejudice and entitlement. And I guarantee you this isn't the first time she's pulled something like this." The older officer nodded grimly. "We'll file a report. If you want to press charges, sir, you'll need to come down to the station." "Oh, I'll press charges," Malcolm said without hesitation. "But I'm not stopping there. I want a full investigation into this HOA and how it's run, because if she could walk in here and claim she had their approval, something is rotten." Karen's face went pale. You wouldn't dare." Malcolm leaned closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Watch me." The days that followed were a whirlwind. By morning, news of the bizarre confrontation had already spread across Willow Creek. Neighbors whispered over hedges, gossip spilled across the community's private Facebook group, and cell phone footage from a neighbor who had recorded the police lights outside Malcolm's mansion made its way onto social media. Within 24 hours, the story had gone viral. Wealthy black entrepreneur confronted by HOA Karen living in his mansion. The comment sections exploded. Some people were outraged on Malcolm's behalf, while others, hiding behind anonymity, echoed Karen's rhetoric about not fitting the community. The split was sharp, and it only deepened as Malcolm began moving forward with legal action. He wasn't alone. His attorney, Jordan Ellis, was a sharp-witted black woman who had handled more than her share of discrimination cases. She sat across from him in his home office 2 days later, flipping through documents with a look of grim satisfaction. "This is a gold mine," she said, tapping a stack of papers. Karen claimed she had HOA approval. The HOA denied it. "But these emails we've obtained during discovery, they tell a different story." Malcolm leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Jordan slid the papers toward him. "The HOA president didn't give her permission, but a smaller committee, one she chairs, did. They knew she was moving in here. They discussed it. Some even encouraged it." Malcolm scanned the emails, each line filling him with fresh anger. The words leapt off the page. It'll be safer if someone like us is in the house. We don't need strangers wandering around while he's gone. This is for the good of the neighborhood. It wasn't just Karen, it was the system. The HOA had enabled her. Malcolm sat back, his chest heaving. So they conspired to let her squat in my house. And when I came back, they thought they could just erase me. Jordan's eyes gleamed with determination. Exactly. And now we have the proof. We're not just going after Karen. We're going after the entire HOA for discrimination, trespassing, and harassment. This is bigger than you, Malcolm. This is about holding them accountable for every time they've tried to decide who belongs here. A sense of purpose surged through him. For years, he had brushed off the HOA's petty fines and veiled insults, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight. But now it was personal. The battle lines in Willow Creek were drawn. Some neighbors rallied behind Malcolm, outraged that one of their own had been treated like an intruder in his own home. They delivered casseroles, offered support, and even stood with him when reporters came calling. Others, however, doubled down on Karen's narrative. They insisted she had been misunderstood, that Malcolm was making it about race, or that the HOA was only trying to maintain standards. Karen herself refused to fade quietly into the background. Despite pending charges, she launched her own PR campaign, giving interviews where she painted herself as a victim. I was only trying to protect our neighborhood, she told one news anchor, her voice quivering with rehearsed emotion. This has all been blown out of proportion by people who want to make everything about race. Malcolm watched the broadcast from his living room, his blood boiling. She was good. He had to give her that. She knew how to play the fragile, well-meaning neighbor card, downplaying her entitlement while framing him as aggressive. But the more she talked, the more cracks appeared in her story. Jordan smirked as she muted the TV. Let her keep talking. Every word digs her deeper. The lawsuit moved forward swiftly. Depositions revealed more HOA board members who had quietly supported Karen's house-sitting. One even admitted that they had considered Malcolm's success showy and unneighborly. The ugliness that had been whispered behind closed doors for years was dragged into the light. But Malcolm wasn't satisfied with just legal victories. He wanted the community to see the truth, to confront the biases that had poisoned it for so long. He began hosting open forums at his home, inviting neighbors to come and share their experiences. To his surprise, many did. An older Asian couple spoke about the constant fines they received for improper landscaping, even though their lawn looked no different from anyone else's. A young Latino family admitted they'd been warned not to let their children make too much noise in the community pool. Even a white single mother revealed she'd been shamed for renting instead of owning. The pattern was undeniable. The HOA wasn't about preserving the neighborhood, it was about controlling it, about gatekeeping who deserved to belong. Malcolm stood before the group one evening, his voice strong and clear. They tried to strip me of my home, but this isn't just about me. This is about every person they've ever silenced, every family they've ever pushed to the margins. We're done being told we don't belong. The room erupted in applause. For the first time, Malcolm felt something shift in Willow Creek. The narrative was no longer Karen's to control. But Karen wasn't finished. Late one night, as Malcolm worked in his office, he noticed motion on his security cameras, finally back online. A figure lurked near the driveway. He zoomed in and his stomach dropped. It was Karen, creeping toward his mailbox, a bundle of papers clutched in her hand. She stuffed them inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder before hurrying away. Malcolm retrieved the papers minutes later. They were crudely written flyers accusing him of fraud, claiming he had falsified documents to buy his mansion, alleging that he was laundering money through his company. It was desperate. It was slander. But it was also dangerous. Because lies had a way of spreading, especially in a community already divided. Malcolm held the papers tightly, his jaw set. Karen might have thought she could scare him, smear him, break him. But she had underestimated him. He wasn't just fighting for his house anymore. He was fighting for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And he wasn't going to stop until justice was served. In a world full of noise, we follow the quiet truth stories that reveal, awaken, and transform. If this story moved you, comment, and subscribe for more untold narratives that challenge perception and stir the soul. Hit the bell so you never miss when the compass points us to the next hidden truth. This is Hidden Compass Stories, where every story leads somewhere deeper.